I have my game plan in my head, but I like to see if someone else is using my game plan. Well, how's that work? Do they time out? Do they, are they stable enough? I like to look at bipod heights.
Okay.
If they're shooting the same gun, I'd be like, how many clicks are they out? Did it work? Did they need more? And then I'll make the corrections to my gun.
All right, what is up, everybody? We are coming at you from lovely, lovely Pennsylvania. We are out in the countryside, slightly remote, not a lot of service down in this hole that we're in, but we're right on the river. Beautiful view of the river that we've been enjoying all weekend at Gem.
Which river, Mark?
The Allegheny.
That's right. All right, I wanted to make sure you're...
The Pennsylvania River, of course.
The lovely Pennsylvania.
The one.
Been seeing some cool jet boats, fan boats, things like that. People cruising by. A lot of fishing going on, so hopefully we didn't blow up somebody's fishing spot. But
actually, there's some fishing going on in the background if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
Those guys look like they're having a real nice time.
They do.
But why are we here, Jim? Why are we here?
Well, because you and I PRS'd for the first time.
And how does that make you feel?
Oh, man, it makes me feel all kinds of ways. But right now, the feeling is one of challenge and slight frustration.
Yep.
Mixed with, fun and also intrigue.
Intrigue, a desire to get better. So we were just at the Vortex Vengeance.
Yes.
A Vortex titled match where Nick and Dave Preston, our guest of honor, kind of trained us up as best they could. They trained Jem up. I was, anyway, we'll get to that.
You were there.
You were there, too.
I was there in spirit.
You were there for the ride.
So really cool experience. Lots of great people. I think they had approximately 90 shooters at this one. A tough match, though.
Right. Yeah, this one, can you guys go into that? So, obviously, we've been preparing for this one over the course of this pod venture here. Now Mark and I actually got to see it with our own eyes. And so, this being our first match ever, we have nothing to compare it to. But a lot of, the pro guys there who've been to all kinds of different matches were saying, they're like, whoa, you guys jumped into the fire.
Yeah, sporty was a common term throughout.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Yeah, so I would rank this match fairly difficult, mainly because of the time. He made a lot of movements, a lot of target changes, all within 90 seconds. Some matches are a minute 45, some matches are 2 minutes, but 90 seconds, 5 positions, 10 positions, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, the amount of movement with the amount of time, it was a lot of movement. There was some stages where you'd move almost 10 times on one stage. Yeah, 10 shots, 10 times you move, and that's a lot in a minute 30 seconds.
Absolutely. And to go into that, so to give people a picture of what that looks like, so we had 18 stages total over the course of 2 days. We did 12 the first day, but then 6 the second day here on Sunday. And each stage, if you've been to different kinds of matches, I know I've been to 3-gun matches before, ones that are natural terrain, and then also base-style 3-gun matches. And those, when people talk about movement, there's a lot of movement. There's moving down range, there's moving side to side, laterally, a lot of that. These are more actually contained to an area of, maybe 20 feet or so, right? But still within that, there's different... you might be coming up on a pile of rocks or a bunch of tires or some various different metal poles, whatever it is. It might be little spots cut out of a wall. You're transitioning the gun between a lot of different spots that are relatively close together, but being that you're shooting precision rifle, the moment you take your gun out, you wind up jamming it back in another spot and trying to reacquire a target that's 700 yards away. It does...
Well, and you can't
for guys like us, it takes a fair amount of time. Guys like Dave, just the guy looks like he does it like it's just Sunday stroll. I don't know.
He makes it look that easy.
Right. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, a lot of that you're talking about the different movements, and one thing that was new to me is you always want to be safe and not point your firearm at other people, right? Your firearm, not your farm. You can point your firearm anywhere. I don't care what you do. But the types of movements, you have to be very, very deliberate. Guys were talking about not breaking, the 120, right? And so as you might need to move to the left, but you don't just point and walk to the left like you might naturally do. I mean, you have to move like, side shuffle and then like, seesaw your rifle back in through ports or things like that. So just kind of like even moving your body in a different way was like somewhat new to me here.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be a lot more deliberate in your movements and careful about the way you're doing it. To do that quickly takes a lot of repetition. Shoot a lot, do that type of shooting a lot, and then it becomes faster with time. Not necessarily you actually physically move faster, but you're making less adjustments in your movements.
Right.
So everything just smooths out, and that makes you take one step rather than 3 shuffles. You drop your rifle down, and you're already pointing at your target. You're not searching for a target. That allows you to take more time on the shot itself and get more impacts just out of spending less time in your movements.
Yeah. Dave, like, that was one thing, and if anybody goes back and watches the YouTube videos that we put together of Mark and I actually shooting this thing, which you totally should. It may be very entertaining for you if you've already enjoyed our other pod ventures where we struggle through everything else that we try.
If you want to feel good about your shooting, particularly, just watch the parts with me.
But that's one of the things that we were commenting about even before we got started talking here, and when you're at the match too. I mean, Dave, you finished second at this particular one. Really,
congratulations!
Yeah,
by
congrats.
The way, very cool.
You're the kind of guy who's out there on the course or on the stage or whatever, and people are watching, and if you time out, everybody looks at each other like, well, we're doomed. But I mean, it's just so fluid, and a lot of the time I found myself watching you on a stage, and I'm thinking to myself, Dave's really good. All right, so Dave's probably going to get done. We get 90 seconds per stage. Dave's probably going to get done in like 40. And but no, you'd effectively utilize the whole 90 seconds. You didn't look like you were rushing. I mean, there was a few times where almost I was getting anxious because I'm like, it's Dave. What is he doing? He's like moving slowly. But somehow you get all the shots in 90 seconds, like right before the buzzer would beep. And then I'm like, well, I'm moving slowly, but I'm getting only like 4 shots off before the buzzer beeps. What, so are you like, how are you doing? How are you so efficient? What is it that you do? Is it mental? Is it physical? Is it?
Well, I mean, you practice to be efficient. You don't want to waste, side shuffle steps, or you want to get in position. We've done it enough times that we can just drop in. The right knee automatically comes up. We make our contact points, and we just fall into position. I'm trying to think. I had another thought that was really good, but
Dave's so good. He's like, I don't know. You just do it.
I mean, okay, there it is. Found it. We're
Sweet.
Good.
All right.
After shooting so many matches for so long, I mean, everything's typically like 10 positions, 10 shots is a little bit out of the ordinary, but we do a lot of 5-position 2 shots. So everything's like 10 to 12 shots. So out of the hundreds or thousands of stages that I've shot, you start to build this, I know how much time I've got left.
Okay.
And you don't want to rush through. If we've got 2 minutes, I would have went even slower. You know what I mean? You want to maximize the time. There's certain times you want to go fast if you're shooting really long range.
Okay.
And you get an impact, you want to follow that up as quick as you can to get the same win call.
Okay.
But when you're taking your time close, you don't want to rush anything.
Or there was the one stage where you had a PRS barricade where it was a timed stage, so they informed us like your time is part of your score, right? Isn't that how that worked?
Yep.
But otherwise, in the other stages, was it the time where it wasn't part of the score?
As long as you finish within that 90 seconds, you're fine. There's no extra credit for finishing fast.
Gotcha.
That was one thing I learned actually there, because I thought that on every stage it was both a combination of points from shooting and hitting targets and also time.
Yeah, that's common, like in multi-gun and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You see that. Yeah, in like PRS type matches, you're allotted the time, and whatever impacts you get during that time is what your points are. Except for, of course, a tiebreaker stage like we did the PRS barricade skill stage today.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're at that point in time, I mean, absolutely utilize all the time on the clock. And then, I'm thinking to myself, I actually asked, I can't remember who I asked, but I'm like, do you think a guy like Dave, does he just have at his house, is there like a beeper that goes off every 90 seconds? It's just perfectly drilled in his brain how long 90 seconds is. Yeah, because it was like, there's a few times where I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, hold on. He still has like 2 shots to make. It was like, boom, beep, time. And it was shot got off right before the 90. But that was
Well, and also through that, though, like at least perceivably from my end, like it's not like I ever saw you bumping up against that line and start to like go faster. Like it was just like dunk, dunk, dunk.
Usually when people think they're getting rushed, they'll start shooting faster.
Right.
They'll start missing. I think you're better off to just keep doing that same pace you've been doing.
Gotcha.
And timeout.
Can you go back and we're talking about kind of some tips and tricks along the way, but can you go back in your memory banks to like your first match? Like what was that like? And was that first match you're like, oh man, I'm hooked, I want to be doing this? Or like, and then also looking at that and where you're at now, like what would be some of your main tips for a new, precision long range, like competition PRS shooter?
My first match was like backwoods sniper, hometown stuff. I mean, there was like 20, 25 people
back
there.
when they still called them sniper
I think it
matches.
was 2010.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a Vortex Vengeance then?
No.
Oh, okay.
2010. But I was shooting a 7 short mag.
Yeah.
Like 11 pounds.
Right on.
Just rocking the 180 grain burgers.
God,
destroying targets.
I think you
Oh,
did
it was
really
fun.
well if you use that word.
I think I finished 16th. So I was like mid-packer.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Which I was pretty happy with. And then I started to get just a little bit better, and after like a year or two, I started winning, and then just kind of, I was hooked.
At what point were you like, you know what, the 7 short just ain't doing it. I'm going to build a 35-pound 6mm gun.
That didn't happen till later. So I kind of went 7 short mag. I went 6.5 47. I shot 300 Win Mag for a while.
Yeah.
That was fun.
You audacious.
And then we got pretty comfortable with it, and we started rocking the 338 Lapuas for fun. I mean,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
the ranges let us do it, and we'd break a target here and there, and we thought that was awesome.
Because we can.
Right.
And then the 6mm started coming in. I shot 6x 47 for 5 years. Went Dasher, went BR, went Creedmoor, went GT, went back to Dasher. I've been all over the place.
And this one right here is
It's a Dasher.
6 Dasher. Okay. Yep.
We should get into the equipment in a sec. We got sidetracked there.
Yeah, I want to go back into this is the simple stuff. We're trying to gear this towards the people who are kind of like in Jim and my shoes here.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask you, okay, so like we said, we'll get to the gear. So if you're all about like wondering about this gun on the table, we'll get to that for sure. One thing I was going to ask, so you all team up in a squad. You're going around stage to stage, and there's a period of time where usually, prior to you shooting the stage, you get to watch the other shooters shoot the stage. I don't know, is that pretty much how it works in all the other matches? For the most part, most of the other matches, like we saw here?
Yeah.
So, depending on what order you're in for that particular stage, because it can switch around a little bit, you kind of rotate through, so it's not always the same guy getting shafted with the first shot, or the first go at every stage. But you get to watch the other guys go in your squad ahead of you. What are you guys watching for? Because sometimes I'd be up there and I'd be like, I'll look through the binos this time and I'll watch this guy, see if he's missing to the right or the left. And the other time it was, I'll look through the binos this time and actually try and find where the targets are. Or like, I'll watch how Dave or Nick or somebody else is moving through the stage and I won't even look at stuff happening downrange.
Right.
What are you guys watching?
And I'll add to that real quick. I hunting coos deer a handful of times. Like I thought that I've seen a lot of glass on tripods. Nothing compared to this event. I mean, there's 12 by 50s, 15s, 18s, and all on big heavy duty tripods. And nearly everybody who's not shooting is glued to those things while somebody else is shooting.
Yeah. We also get a boat ripping by here in the background.
I wonder
The
if that's one
Allegheny.
of the fan boats.
You think?
No.
Nope, regular.
Just,
Regular. Oh, that's our fishermen.
Yep.
Anyway, but yeah. So what are you guys primarily watching for?
I like to watch how they move through different heights, what works, what they tried, I have my game plan in my head, but I like to see if someone else is using my game plan. Well, how's that work? Do they time out? Do they, are they stable enough? I like to look at bipod heights.
Okay.
If they're shooting the same gun, I'll be like, how many clicks are they out? Did it work? Did they need more? And then I'll make the corrections to my gun.
Yeah. Now, when I get to a stage, the first thing I do is I start looking downrange. First of all, locate the targets, determine what the wind direction is, and that plays a huge part. I mean, it's not always a full crosswind. I mean, it might be a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, which changes your trajectory quite a bit. So I look at that, look at the mirage, look at the grass, look at the trees, look at the if somebody else is shooting, I'm looking at the dust coming off the target. Which direction is that blowing? Is it just poofing straight out and floating up, or is it going right, going left? So trying to figure out what the wind is doing at different intervals downrange. So that's a big thing. When I'm writing down my drop on my wrist coach, I'm figuring out the wind too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like Dave said, like there's that one stage where we shot on the dump truck today.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was trying to figure out what height do I need on my bipod so I could, for one, see the target, for two, not clip the bottom of the truck.
So I went conservative on that one. That was one where, talking about bipod height, I was like, oh, I think this lower one will be fine. And it wasn't fine, but I also was more comfortable being lower than shooting the truck. That was like right in my face.
Right.
So,
like Rich shot right after me in our squad, and my bipod height, I happened to just set it properly, and I got off the stage. He's like, "Can I borrow your bipod?" And he said, "Yep, just leave it exactly how it is." So he put my bipod on my gun, his gun, and ran it just like that. It worked out perfect for him. But yeah, I mean that's stuff you should look for.
Yeah. And everybody, like, a lot of times you'll see a stage that generally gets run one sort of way, but then you'll see somebody else do it a slightly different way, and you're kind of like, oh, that's interesting.
mm-hmm.
But, like, going back to the wind thing that you were talking about, Nick, wind at this one was really tough because we were on these big, long clear cuts and some thick timber around it. And, I mean, you'd be in the glass and you'd be looking at the tall grass along the way to the targets. Nothing. It didn't appear to even be moving at all. You'd look at the canopy on the sides of the range, wouldn't really see anything moving. Right. And, I mean, it was like, it looked, if you just took a screenshot of what you were seeing through the optics, still. Yeah. Like, hold dead on. And then guys would be like, no, I need like a 0.5 mil hold off to the right.
Right. Well, that long range stage we had out with ended on the two bears.
Mm-hmm.
I was the first shooter on that stage, and I was holding 6/10 left.
Yeah.
To get my impacts on it, and then the wind slowly started dying. And by the time Dave went, he was in the middle group. He was basically holding straight up, and then Ryan was the last shooter, and he was holding the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean, while we were standing there, the wind that wasn't there at the shooter, that was only present downrange, started coming in from the opposite direction at the muzzle.
Yeah.
So it started moving around on us.
East Coast matches are a lot like that. Not a whole lot of wind, lots of tunnels cut through trees that we have to, put our shooting range in. But you go out west and all the guys make fun of the guys out east because, oh, you don't have any wind. It's easy out there. But I think this light, switchy, variable stuff, it's not a lot, but it's just enough to miss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I think that's tough.
When you're shooting at...
Do you think have you shot matches out west? Like, is it almost like easier to, even though like it might be more wind, is it easier to predict?
It's usually a lot more, but it's really steady.
Yeah. Okay.
Like going out to Oklahoma, you'll get like really high winds, but usually it's from a fairly constant direction.
Okay.
A wind at your back or a wind in your face is always the hardest because it starts fishtailing a little bit and it's changing not just like how much wind am I holding, it's which side of my plate am I holding on.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes quite difficult.
Well, and where Nick and Dave are talking about like, oh, I held, 6/10 or 0.5 or whatever, that's where it's super handy to have a reticle with a lot of data. It seems like most guys are running mills, so I think in some ways like picking whether you want to run mill or MOA is like arbitrary in some ways, but I think in this game, just to be speaking the same language as the person next to you, it would be beneficial to be running mills because, like, if they're like, Nick, like, you could be like, oh, dude, hold 0.3, and I'd be like, how much is that? And then that person might be like, I don't know. Like,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I was trying to even weight, too, like, how much importance I should put towards what people were saying as they were coming off the stage, too. They'd be like, oh, yeah, like, everything was going to the right. And I'd be like, so does that mean I should just start out holding left edge of plate, or should I, because, like, you never know when the wind's going to change. And so that's also, too, where having a game plan and then having good follow-through and, staying in the optic, too, and trying to spot for yourself is nice. I mean, luckily, Mark, you and I, the way this match was set up, first-time shooters ever, I personally like this a lot. We could be coached. So luckily we had the benefit of, we're trying our best to follow through. And we, again, we can get into some of that too with like the gear setup actually. We're trying our best to follow through. I could spot a lot of my shots, but there were some where it was like, unless the guy behind me would have said, like what they were saying, like, yeah, you were off 1 o'clock about 6 inches. I'd have no idea. I'd probably just send another one in the same spot just to see if maybe the first one was a fluke.
Yep.
But yeah.
That's a good point too. I mean, you're talking about listening to what other people say and being able to communicate with other people and hear what they're doing I would say is definitely a good thing. Getting in the habit of trying to have your own game plan, kind of not necessarily carved in stone, but figured out pretty well so that you're not 100% listening to other people.
Yeah.
Because who knows, the guy in front of you, he might have had a bad zero, and he might give you data that's wrong. And
so basically, come up with your game plan. Listen to what everybody else says, but just keep that over here.
Yeah.
If something's not going right with your game plan, maybe you start filtering some of the data.
Kind of
filter it back in.
Yeah. Well, one thing that went through my mind too, when folks are like, "Oh, the wind is this, hold this," but I'm like, well, "You might have a completely different cartridge than me."
Right.
Like what if your velocity is like, way more than mine, or your BC is dramatically different than mine? Like, how in the kind of like the bracket of most commonly used cartridges, like how much can you trust that when somebody says, "Oh yeah, hold 3/10"?
Surprisingly, quite well, actually.
Okay.
Because in the ranges that we're shooting at, most like the barricades and stuff, we're usually sitting within a couple 100 feet per second.
Okay.
And we're all using fairly efficient bullets. And, I mean, their BCs aren't all the same, of course, but they're in the same range. So, I mean, what might be 0.6 for me might be 5 or 7 for you. I mean, so you're still going to be in the realm. So if you're way the hell off, I might be able to at least guide you back on the target and you can correct it from there. But so, yeah, it's not always going to be perfect. But if you're completely in no man's land and you're not really sure where to go, and especially you guys' first match, you're allowed to be coached on target. That kind of stuff is super big because it's great for learning. Not knowing, okay, where is that going? Oh, now I know where it's going. And then you actually connect with the target and you can start using that data running out, especially that kind of troop line. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, you and I were both shooting 6.5 Creed, same ammo. We have very similar velocities, so we were actually able to share the same dope as well. So that was definitely a convenience for us.
Mark, it's so weird being at these matches where people are asking us, like, "Oh, what are you guys shooting?" We're like 6.5 Creed, and we might as well be telling them we're shooting like a musket. I mean, seriously. At this point in time, everybody's got 6 LOL, 6 BRB, 6 like TTYL, and I mean it's like we're shooting 6.5 Creed over here, and everyone.
Oh, sorry, it's gone.
I got a bug. We're shooting 6.5 Creed over here. It might as well be the Stone Ages.
Yeah,
I mean that happened fast.
I was feeling pretty basic.
Seriously. Also, we're not reloading, so very basic again.
Yeah,
pulling our ammo out of branded boxes.
Yeah, getting back to the kind of like the shooting aspect and being not necessarily like a new shooter, but definitely a new shooter in an event like this, like in this I guess format, style, whatever. One thing that I mean, just you're like, oh, first you find the targets. I mean, that sounds simple, but there is a sea of targets out there. So number one, like you do need your optics to figure. It's not like you're like, oh yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, yeah, there might be 3 or 4 versions of 1, 2, 3, 4 out there. Or this rack, that rack, that rack. But
because the stages are all next to each other, kind of on top of one another, so you get their targets are all scattered.
And that was actually initially less so today. I don't know if it's because I got used to it or because the stages on the second day seemed a little bit more simplified than some of them the previous day. But I mean, there was times I'm like, okay, wait, no, where's the target? Okay, nope, it's that one. Wait, oh, and then we go, and then it's not just finding the targets, but it's the target order too, and how you engage those targets and how many times. Oh, 2 shots. Oh no, 3 shots. It's like a game of memory. I didn't win that game.
I'd like to take you guys out to a match. So this would be more of, would you call this as a kind of a square range type of match? I guess I don't know. And then there's more of the field style match where basically you have a farmer lets you use his property and you put targets all out in the middle of nowhere. So you got to locate them that way, and they're nowhere near other targets. So you have that format too.
So would that be in theory easier? Maybe
it depends. Sometimes they're hard to find.
Oh well, no.
Yeah, I was
when I
gonna
hear
say,
you, when you're
as
saying,
far as-
what?
As far as finding targets, I think this one was average.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it
not
wasn't bad,
not
actually.
difficult.
Okay.
Well, when
Yeah.
you're saying, "Oh, I'd like to take you out to this match," let's
No,
not
no,
make it worse.
it's not that.
Anything that was hard.
I think you
let's
might
not make
enjoy it more because you
got
two
it.
hunt, and
yeah.
being able to pick things out of the terrain, you might actually be better for you because you're right. I mean, you look down range and you have a cluster of targets, like 50 berms and a bunch of tree stumps that were deadfall and stuff. I mean, it was kind of
And like
there's a lot of stuff.
At this match, all the targets were basically straight ahead of you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where you go out west and you'll have your first targets off to your left.
Oh, interesting.
Next target's here,
Oh, shoot.
and you've got like a 180-degree fan of
Yeah.
all these targets. So when your wind's coming a certain direction, now you've got to change your wind, and you could possibly even change which way you hold on the target as you move across your target string.
Yeah, you might have
A
Now I'm
left
thankful.
wind over here
I
and a
know.
right wind over here.
1,000-yard target with a smaller wind hold than your 400-yard target, just because of the direction you're shooting.
I'm not there yet.
No.
No. But, and finding those targets, too, that's the other thing. Like, I mean, one, making sure you're on the right magnification. Like, when it comes time to actually then getting behind the optics, make sure your rifle scope's on the right magnification so you're not, like, trying to look up a gnat's butt or, like, way too zoomed out or whatever. But the other thing was, I mean, if the competition's been going on for a while, I think somebody mentioned this, possibly even one of our previous ones, or somebody said it sometime before to me, competition's been going on for a while, those targets are going to get shot up. And then all of a sudden, there's trees everywhere, creating a lot of shade, and there's like big dirt mound berms, and then a dark shot up IPSC.
It's a groundhog.
Yeah, he's praying.
Oh yeah, we got a groundhog. You have to. Oh,
He might
he
be
sprung into action.
He might be in trouble.
Whistle pigs. That's what they call them out here, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so those targets can be difficult to spot. You're thinking like, oh, I'm going to see this nice bright white target. No, it's actually gray, and it's in a shadow, which is gray, and it's
Right.
next to shadowed berms, which are gray.
Yeah.
There was definitely a couple times where I'm like, I know I'm looking at the target, and then, but it was just hard. You're like, oh yeah, it's that gray square in the gray dirt. Like it was tough.
Yeah.
Something that they did at this match, which was really nice. I got to compliment Matt Steiner and Ken and Mark. They put placards next to a lot of targets. I'm a huge fan of that. A lot of times a match director will just take a square piece of steel, paint it green, and say, all right, shoot the green target. Well, the last group shooting the day, that is not a green target anymore.
No.
Them taking a red placard, put it next to it, and paint a number on it. So you say, all right, you're shooting the targets next to the red placards.
Mm-hmm.
That was great.
I did
Oh,
feel
that
like,
was huge. That's how I knew I was looking at the target. I'm
Right.
like, I know it's there.
I
Yeah.
did feel like people, absolutely, and people had an easier time or a quicker time, kept people moving through the stages probably because you weren't spending all your time like, no, it's not that one. Is it that? No, it's not that one. It's the one to the right of the tree. Okay, we're surrounded by trees, so pick. Yeah, because that
So,
gets
One to
pretty
the right of the
difficult.
tree. Yeah, right.
But there's a lot to be mentally aware of. If you show up thinking that you're just a pretty baller shot, and you're gonna just ball out at a PRS match, if it's your first one, I mean, you're gonna kind of get your ego probably hurt a little bit. I don't know. I mean, there's certainly maybe people out there who can just like pick it up in a snap, but I don't know if there's many because it's the shooting is only just the little icing on the top, I feel
Right.
like,
Mhm.
for everything else, making sure you're not, somehow accidentally putting your rifle in a position where it's going to go, if you fall over something as you're moving, it's going to go down the line. You're going to get DQ'd for a safety, some sort of problem there. Making sure your bolt is open when you move. I even saw some guys that were like far more seasoned than we were. You're in the moment, and they only want you to take one shot on a target before you move or transition or change something. And those guys go boom, and they rack another one in, and then it's like, oops, I need to move, but I can't move until my bolt's open. And then you
Yeah.
got to open up a bolt. I mean, stuff like that happens, and it's all these little mental game things that you're playing. And then, oh yeah, shoot, now I got to execute a shot at 800 yards on like an 8-inch piece of
Right.
steel.
Yeah.
That was a big one for me coming from, pretty much a hunting background, and running a bolt gun predominantly for that. I really had to almost like retrain myself and my mind because, it's like you take a shot at a deer or whatever, boom. I'm racking another one before I even know what happened with the first one, know, because you're just like trying to get back on. Maybe I need to make a follow-up shot. Hopefully it's just laying right there.
And you're definitely not watching through the scope what happens because you're shooting a light.
I'm shooting a lightweight,
300
high caliber,
WISM.
Which I dearely love. But yeah, you're not going to watch your impact. Not very often. I have a couple times, but not very often.
Yeah.
And so that was really difficult to almost have to just retrain because, like you said, you fire that shot. Well, and then the other thing is only closing your bolt once you're on target. And that's probably just second nature to you guys right now. But it definitely wasn't for me to look through. And there's actually several times where I would do the right thing and open my bolt, transition to the next target, and I'd be like, okay, sweet. I'm going to squeeze it off. I'm like, ugh.
I saw that happen to you.
My bolt is still open. So now I've wasted a bunch of time. Now I got to close my bolt. Essentially kind of almost reacquire the target because I'm not, I'm not able, at least for me personally, I'm not closing the bolt perfectly on target. And so now I've wasted the time of probably 2 or 3 on one. And so that was definitely tricky because there were so many times, Jim, where I'm like, oh, okay, I got you. I'm getting ready to touch it off.
And
I'm like, oh.
Dead
That
trigger.
was frustrating. And that goes back into the mental side of it too. I just made so many oh my gosh.
It's tough.
So many mental errors.
It's tough.
It is. It's tougher than it looks, seems.
I'd say it's 90% mental. 10% just pulling the trigger. Because I could put my wife on I could set this gun up, dial it in for, say hold left side of target, and she could shoot 1,000 yards and hit it first shot.
Yep.
But it's all the stuff that went into it to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all just thinking and mental.
Yeah.
Stage preparation is a huge thing. When you get there, planning, everything that happens before that clock starts for you, that's going to largely determine whether or not you do well on the stage at all. Because this part right here is actually not difficult.
Right. And it can even start the night before. For example, we can get into the giant blunder that I made the night before involving our Kestrel and some data in our matchbook, because the matchbook laid out all of the... Okay, and actually, this will get into ammo, too.
Yeah.
Right? So matchbook lays out all of the target distances, and it gives you a synopsis of what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to move through each stage. So you get that the day before. We're like, this is great. Okay, we're sitting down.
This was a great matchbook, by the way. I haven't looked at a lot of them, but all the information was there, very concise, very clear, definitely a handy reference.
Yeah, and so we're watching, Alone on History Channel the night before, and we're just thinking, okay, cool. All I gotta do is go through this Kestrel with all of our information in it, and just look up the distances for each target, write it down. We got these target cards over around our wrist. That'll make that part easy. We'll already be basically dialed or know what our data needs to be. Well, the problem, of course, was ammo. And Nick pointed this out to me when we first showed up, because I just went in. We were shooting 6.5 Creed, factory ammo. I went in to the range and grabbed a couple of boxes of 6.5 Creed before we left. I grabbed 3 or 2.5 or something brown cases of 6.5 Creed, and then 1 white case. And I'm like, it's all 140 grain ELD match. Come on. Won't make a difference. We show up and Nick is like, oh boy, different lots. And I'm like, Nick is just, he's PRSing.
I was like, oh, okay, 10
PRSing.
feet per second. We'll be okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we get out there. We find out there's over 100 feet per second difference between the two lots coming out of our guns. Same literally same everything.
I would have to think a variance like that pretty uncommon, though, because I've shot a lot of their stuff.
I've seen a variance like that, just if you have the same lot of ammo and take 2 rifles manufactured by the same company and see 100 feet per second spread.
I don't think it's a ding on it.
It's not a ding on it at all.
No.
Because they're using a different lot of powder, different lot of brass, different lot of
variables.
There's a lot of variables that change a lot of things,
and they're mass producing it.
Yeah. So it's definitely not a ding, because the ammo itself is consistent as hell within the lots.
Right.
Gotcha.
And so we're at this point, we're oh boy. So we figure out this 100 foot per second plus difference, and we had 2663 out of the one box of the white box, and we had 2767 out of all the other stuff. We're all right, well, we have more of the other stuff, so that's what we'll use in the match. We'll practice some with this 2663 white box lot, whatever. So, of course, we plug all that data into the Kestrel. I forget to change it back to 2767, so I do all these cards. I'm going through everything, trying to figure out how our Kestrel works, playing a lot of Snake, watching Clay Hayes, and all this stuff. Go through it all. We come the next day, and I'm like...
Stage one.
Stage one. I'm like, Mark, you know what I did?
I knew immediately.
So the whole rest...
immediately what it was when Nick was like, plug in, like... Okay, well, this will be your backup dope. And in my head, I'm like, I don't think we should have two kinds.
And I remember that, like, Nick said something. I think he was like, what are you guys dialing for this stage? And I'm like, this. And he goes, huh. And I was like, oh, no. So for the entire rest of the match, we were like, we'd get up to the stage. And, of course, Mark and I kept forgetting our match book. So I'm, like, asking the RO what the distances are. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me go back to this Kestrel, write this thing out. Yeah, that was a mess.
They worked great, Jim.
That was a mental error that then
proceeded
to cause many other errors.
We've mentioned it a couple times. I know we're kind of waiting to get into gear a little bit. We've brought it up, the wrist coach thing, though.
Yeah.
So tell us what a wrist or explain what a wrist coach is.
There's a lot of different variables. The ones that you guys are just homemade ones that I use, and
I thought they were great.
They work okay.
Yeah.
A lot of guys I saw would have just like the dope for that particular stage on their rifle,
yep.
kind of card on their gun.
That's great. I actually really like that as well. The only problem I have with that is because I like to run a shorter length of pull for shooting off a barricade, so I'm about a ½ inch short on my length of pull. But for where I have the scope position, where I have to put one of those on my rail, then I don't have room for my bubble level anymore. So I end up just running it on my wrist, which is fine with me. But
how often are you checking your bubble? Every shot, every time?
Especially on barricades, I'm definitely glancing up out of my peripheral to make sure I'm level because it's really easy to get off that. And if you're shooting 600, 700, 800 yards off a barricade and you're canted a degree, I mean, on a sporty target, it's hard.
Dave don't got a bubble level.
I actually do.
Where is it at?
Where is your bubble?
It's
in the chassis.
It's actually an inclinometer.
Oh, the files are in the computer. Look at that.
Are all bubble levels inclinometers, or is your bubble level?
No, I think there was it's a whole other story, but there was a patent on a bubble level integrated into a chassis, and some companies couldn't do that. So now there's an inclinometer, which is like a little steel ball that does the same thing. It's just the ball like uses gravity to go back and forth.
Dave has an inclinometer. Everyone.
Inclinometer.
Important.
But I check that. I use it quite a bit.
Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not checking it every shot, but whenever I get into a new position, I'll glance down. And then if I need to take 5 shots from that position, I probably just check it the first time. But
I was at least eyeballing my reticle to be level. And can you guys go into explaining what is the importance of making sure your reticle rifle is level?
So if you think about when you're dialing elevation, you're actually dialing your reticle down, and you're having to force your barrel up when you bring your reticle back up on the target. So if you imagine when you pull the trigger and the bullet leaves muzzle, you got this arc of trajectory. And if you cant the rifle, that arc isn't just going straight up in an arcing fashion coming straight back down. It's arcing up and then veering off to the left or to the right. And that's based on how much you're canting your gun. And you'll actually have a vertical dispersion doing that too. So if you cant it to the right, you're going to hit right and a little bit low. Now, the low is going to be less, but the right you'll see. Definitely, especially if you're shooting at a small target.
It's so weird because like a barrel is a cylinder, so if you twist it, how would it...
It's not. It's the scope-barrel relationship.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Because you're kind of changing like your optic over bore height when you cant a gun, but also then you're changing where the scope is in relation to it left and right too.
The center of the crosshair is no longer perpendicular or no longer aligned with the force of gravity in relation to its position on your barrel.
Think about a holdover stage where you have to hold 5 mils down. Well, you put your crosshair on, come up 5 mils, and spin your scope in the scope rings. Well, that point that was on target is now over here.
Sure enough.
Like when you start thinking about it that way,
actually, I never thought of it.
It doesn't line up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything has to be perfectly vertical.
Yeah. So just to his point, like let's say that you're holding over 10 mils, you hold up and you look at the dot in the center of your crosshair and you tip it 1 degree. That dot is no longer straight above your target. It's to the right of your target.
Sure enough. Okay. Well, there you have it. What were you about to say, Mark?
Real quick, I'm going to go back to just starting a stage.
Yes.
So, and would you say kind of like the protocols pretty standard as far as like how you begin, like you go over the course of fire, do you understand the course of fire, essentially shooter engage, are you ready? Is that pretty standard?
For the most part. I mean, it's pretty basic as far as that goes.
And like having essentially like all your stuff ready, like in your hands, like that's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
So maybe talk through that a little bit, because that was one thing for me, like just even kind of learning like maybe where I wanted to keep things, or even like, noticing like both you guys have those mags on your belt, or mag holders with your mag in it on your belt. So it's kind of having like an extra set of hands on your belt. It's keeping it handy, exposed. Like, I'm trying to hold my my bag and putting that on my shoulder, and then it's like, okay, you can load your gun. So I'm digging in my cargo pocket of my pants and fishing around for that, and the bag falls off your shoulder. Like, that's definitely interesting too. Like, you kind of have to be like self-contained, but also like really like organized, like have like a system down, I guess. So maybe talk through like maybe a system that works good for you.
I'm definitely a creature of habit. If I have a routine or a flow or a process, I do things way better and way more smoothly. If I have to do things on the fly, sometimes my brain just like, it just shuts off. I have brain farts. It's bad. But so I do a couple of things like you said. I have my mag on my hip. I have my spare mag, and what I use is a dump pouch. I'm certainly not the first person that's used that at a PRS match, but I see a lot more of them coming out now, and they are fantastic. It's just
what do you keep in there, or what are you putting in there?
My Kestrel. I have my primary mag that I'm going to be pulling out to start the stage. I have like my pens and stuff like that. I have my dope cards in there. And then like after the stage, if somebody's following me around grabbing my brass for me, and I got my hands full, and they say, "Hey, here's your brass," I'll say, "Stick it in that pouch," and just drop it in there. And super handy piece of gear. But that process, like I said, when I go up to the stage and and I start looking to win, start writing down my dope and all that, like that's the same every time. And if I start messing with that, get that out of order, then I'll probably go up to the stage unprepared.
Gotcha. Dave, what's your kind of go system look like?
I'm pretty organized too. I carry, I think, quite a bit of stuff, but most of the time, I don't like to shoot a stage with too much stuff. I like having the available equipment, and I'll pick and choose what I want to take with me, but I don't like taking too much up to the stage. You may have to start with all in your hand, but you don't have to finish with all of it. Okay. So there's some scenarios where I'll start with a couple different bags, and I'll leave it at the first position and move on with the other bag that I want.
Sure.
And that just goes into the kind of like that stage planning and being like, okay, I'm going to shoot this one like this, so I'm going to use that bag, but I don't need, after that, I only need this bag. Or
yeah, I'm kind of a one bag guy just to keep it simple, but sometimes I'll take 2 or even 3, but I'll have, like, I won't carry those with me the whole way through. They might help for this prone stage where I need more support in the back to get the right height. But then as soon as I move to a different position, I'll just leave those right there on the ground.
You ever have like a bag under your armpit that you're going to use later in the stage, and then like once the timer beeps, you just kind of like drop it from your armpit and like drop kick it over to this position where you're going to use it, then you meet up with it later?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not
necessarily
the armpit drop kick thing, but
yeah,
we'll chuck it over.
Oh, you just chuck it over there?
I guess, why not?
I've started a stage with one
where do you hide your third arm? I don't have enough.
Jimbo.
Shouldn't have asked, actually. Fourth. Anyway. But
I've started with one bag on my shoulder before and have one in my hand and just toss the first bag, grab the bag off my shoulder, and go shoot the first couple of targets.
I'm mainly just a rifle bag kind of guy, but you see a lot of tripod shooters that, I mean, I don't know how they do it. I'm not a tripod guy, but they will shoot tripod on everything. They've got their gun, their bags, their tripod. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff going on. Those are the organized guys.
I didn't see, when can you do that? Because here it seemed like you had to shoot from the prop every time.
I mean, think of the PRS barricade. Just the standard 4 positions where they time it. There's guys that will put the front of their gun on the barricade, and they'll use the tripod as rear support.
Oh.
Pinch the tripod with their hand and grab the back of the stock. And
now out west, 2-minute time limits help that because tripods, they're super stable, but a lot of times they take more time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if a match director puts 90 seconds in there, nobody's getting their tripods out.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know how people do it. Yeah, I'm too slow to deploy a tripod. I'd rather just take the bag.
Well, and then we had that one stage here where it was actually a tripod stage.
Yeah.
With the Radians, and Jim, you actually did really good on that.
Thank you.
That was
I got 8 out of 10 on that.
Yeah, let's say you only dropped 2 on that one. You killed it.
That was impressive.
I enjoy shooting off tripod. Like if it's, in that case we had to. The stage was set up to do it, and so in that case I liked it because you were already kind of like set up.
That was good, and you'd seen it before. You shot a coyote off the tripod.
That's right. Yeah, that Radiant tripod.
Last January.
Well, now we're talking about gear. So we've touched on ammo a bit, and Mark, let's get this out there right off the bat. You and I found out some things about our guns. Any of you who've watched or listened to more than one pod venture, or if you've gone back and you saw some episodes where we had this home built versus pro built or homemade versus pro made, whatever it was. Mark, you had this gun put together by Curtis Custom Weapons. I have a gun put together by Jim and Nick Customs, and and we like them. They're pretty sweet. They shoot really good. Mm-hmm. This was the first time they've actually been in a PRS environment at a match, shooting stages, and we got a little bit of a taste of why these PRS guys, some of this, these precision shooters, these competition guys, we've given them some grief for their particularity in certain things.
Particularity in this, and I've got this, that. Like, like hearing you guys even talk before here, it's like, I've got this for that and that. I'm like, this is just excessive.
Or when Scott Parks was going like, the 6.5 Creedmoor just recoils too much.
Right. And now,
what is this guy talking about?
After like doing it and watching you guys, I'm like, oh, that's why. And I know we're getting ready to talk about gear, but I want to talk about stability because that was one of my biggest issues was just not, which I think that's what those stages and props are for. They're to make you fight it, right? They're not to be easy. But man, I just couldn't get stable. And with a heavier gun and a lighter recoiling gun, I think that would have been a benefit.
Well, you forced me to get that damn carbon fiber barrel for you because you're like, oh, I gotta get the lightest thing. So I stuck those weights in your forehand. And you were threatening to take them out the whole match. You want a lighter gun.
I was joking.
Of course you were.
So many times, and especially if you're
Can we get those out?
If you're listening and you're really new to guns, I think, one of the things that people will oftentimes think is they see a big gun, like one on the table, big gun, heavy gun. They think, boy, I bet that thing kicks like a mule. They don't.
No.
The bigger the better as far as stability goes. It may be a bit of a hoss to get around, but again, like I said, you're not going to be doing, if you've seen like multi-gun running gun, this isn't like that. Maybe there are some matches. I don't know. There probably are some where you gotta huck it.
More like the sniper matches and stuff. You'll see that.
Yeah, but in these particular cases, again, if you can move 20 feet with the thing and you can move it from a spot to spot. That's all you got to do. But then once it's locked down, I kept seeing these guys. I was a bit envious of them because I'm thinking like, my gun's not light, but like, it's not particularly heavy either. And like getting them in spots, sometimes you'd see guys out there today and yesterday. They set a rifle down and the rifle just like boom, like it just becomes one with the barrier. Meanwhile, like ours, you get in there, you get on a bag, it's still kind of wobbly. You're still trying to find the nice balance point for it. And meanwhile, of course, you're trying to look through the scope and find the target. And you get on the target, and it's just easier to manipulate the gun when you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then the gun goes off, and that moves. I was watching some guns go off, like yours, and I know you definitely know how to manage recoil and are pro level, Dave. But like to me, like from the outside in, I'm like, the only reason I know your gun shot is because I heard a noise. Like it's like you can it's just like it's.
That was a good gun sound, man.
You like that?
Yeah.
Do I have a future in like movie sounds or something?
Yeah, you could be like the guy from Police Academy.
Celery.
Yeah.
So anyway, it does seem like there's some benefit there for sure.
A balance, like Jim mentioned, balance. That's
you're
really
not just putting weight on it. It's balanced. almost
can't just slap
every
weight on anywhere,
barricade that we were on, this was the part that was supporting my rifle right here.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So if I were to pick this up, which I couldn't because it's too heavy, but I had to put all these weights out there to get it to teeter-totter right there.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't want it too heavy in the front or too heavy in the back, because then you're physically using your body to help support or change that.
Okay.
Sometimes you may need to take your shoulder off. You get into a certain position, or it's a really small target. You completely back yourself off the gun and just look through and
Wow.
touch the trigger.
My goodness. 50-50 weight distribution, Mark. Talk about that a lot in race cars, too.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's a big deal.
That's why you have weights in your forend, because with a carbon fiber barrel, you just can't get a rifle to balance like that. So we had to go with a fairly light stock and weight out your forend a little bit. But you could still use a few weights up there.
Interesting. Where are the weights, Nick? We don't have my
They're
gun
these
out here
things, Mark.
right now.
No, on Mark's rifle, so it's a
Oh, in
KRG
Mark.
chassis. So there's actually slots inside the floor end, internal. So I bolted them in before we put the gun together, and I hid that from you.
Yeah, they're in there, so you can hide them from your lightweight friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I hid them from you. But without those in there, you'll feel a difference in balance. Like it takes that balance point from just forward of the mag well to closer to the grip, which is not ideal for shooting off a barricade.
Okay, gotcha.
The further along we got, the more I was like, gosh, I wish my gun weighed more. I mean, it was so, like, I'm hearing myself, and I'm like, don't say it,
Like,
Jim. This is
damn
the
it.
stuff you used to make fun of him for. But no, I wish my gun weighed more. And then, of course, I was running into the issue of my trigger, too.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, should we get into that, Mark?
We can.
both had some trigger.
Yeah.
We had some trigger, not issue. Well, not,
We needed the mama bear of triggers.
we had really heavy and really light to start with. Now we adjusted my trigger. So Nick was telling me, he's like, Mark, you need to work on your follow through, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I'm trying. I'm trying, Dad.
It's really hard.
But I mean, that trigger was set like super. I mean, you would like get on target and about breathe on it, and it was. I mean, it wasn't unsafe. Like, I don't think it was unsafe, but it was.
Right.
You didn't have to give it that much to make it go bang.
Well, yours was. So you have a Trigger Tech Diamond trigger, which is a fantastic trigger, and they go down very low. But we set yours probably a little bit too low for the weapon system. I mean, if you have a really heavy gun and a super light trigger, you can put the gun in place and pull the trigger and follow through because the gun's not moving.
Okay,
but you're
right.
shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor in a fairly light rifle. So when it recoils, it's going to come back, and your finger is going to come off the trigger, and you can't have enough of a deliberate pull on your trigger to ride that recoil straight back and keep your finger on the trigger and follow through the way you should. And that's when I picked up your rifle and I shot it. And I said, Mark, I can't actually properly follow through with your gun either. We need to turn up your trigger a little bit. Now, if your gun weighed more, it'd be different.
Like, I think we've talked about this in the past, but I think it warrants like repeating, like follow through. Like, what is that? And I definitely was watching you guys, and you were like, I could actually see it happening. So maybe describe follow through.
The way I look at follow through is when the shot breaks, you are just imagine like you're shooting a basketball. You follow through like this. Flip the hand down and actually like continue out that motion after it leaves. Yeah, exaggerate it out. And the same thing like when I'm really walking through somebody with the fundamentals of marksmanship, when I'm teaching them what follow through is, I will literally say squeeze until the gun goes off, and then keep in your head, count off 1/1000 before you actually remove your finger from the trigger. And that'll force you to follow through with your shots. So that means that the only muscle in your hand that is actually being squeezed is in your finger. And then when the gun recoils, that's still the only place where there's any pressure. So you're not changing your hand movements from shot to shot, which will actually throw off your shots.
Okay.
What is it about not following through right that throws off your shot? I mean, because I'm thinking about like, okay, the bullet's moving out of this like 20-some-odd inch barrel at 27,000 or not 27,000 feet, 2,700 feet
We
per
were
second.
dialing 0.
we didn't have to dial, in fact, but no, at 2,700 feet per second. And I'm like, is it possible that I could,
That's where a heavier gun comes in too.
Am I doing the old like bending a bullet in the air thing where you swoop the gun across as you pull the trigger? Or?
Where it is at the muzzle.
Okay.
At the crown of that muzzle. When if you manipulate the gun even a fraction of a centimeter at that pistol grip, the muzzle of that rifle is changing. not
More.
significantly, but it's changing more than you're moving that grip.
Yeah.
And if you imagine a millimeter of movement at the muzzle, well, a centimeter at 100 yards is a tenth of a mil. Or 100 centimeter at 100 meters is a tenth of a mil. So a millimeter at a muzzle, I mean, you could easily get a tenth of shot placement out of that.
Okay. I'll talk about my trigger real fast.
Yes.
You know what made me feel better? Dave said that the trigger was limiting me. That made me feel a lot
Certainly
better.
was.
And you did pretty good.
I did. I mean, I was in like, top 80.
Yeah.
No, I was in
think
top 90.
Better than that.
Top 90. Big deal. Which means that I just placed in general. But my trigger is like stock. We didn't change the trigger at all. It's stock Remington 700. It's like an 8-pound trigger. It is heavy.
It's very heavy.
So heavy that almost every time I go to shoot it, I have to check to see if the safety's on. And that is a problem because when you're on stage and you're on a rickety thing, all your rifle is on is a bag and you're trying to brace into something with as much as you possibly can, but usually it's not ideal. And you're trying to squeeze the trigger. I mean, I'm like, okay, there's the target. My reticle's right on the target. This is going to be awesome. I'm pulling the trigger. I'm nice and steady, pulling the trigger, still pulling. Okay, yeah, adding more force. And now I'm starting to add so much force, and I've been sitting there so long that I'm starting to wobble again. And I'm like, no, concentrate. Keep it steady. And I'm still pulling. And then I'm like, am I on safe? No. Okay, still pulling. And finally, and actually it's taking a lot of time too.
Now my finger's starting to hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Now the match is over. But anyway, finally the gun goes off. And by the time it goes off, I'm thinking about all kinds of other things. I'm shaking a little bit. And I'm also getting frustrated because, it's just not going off yet. So usually I wind up punching the trigger because I'm like, just go. And that.
There were a few times where I'm watching you shoot and I'm looking at the tip of your barrel you're rock steady. And you're just sitting there squeezing. I'm like, is he trying to figure out what the wind's doing? And then a few seconds later the gun goes off and oh no, he's just slowly squeezing this.
Yep. No, yeah, it would take a number of seconds for me once I actually initiated the firing sequence for the gun to actually go off.
Jim C says add an ounce at a time with your trigger squeeze until the gun goes off, which is a great philosophy for follow through.
But
with that rate, you time out.
I was to say, what's 16 times 8? Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna have to pop in another trigger there. But I feel like it's been good practice though because I had to stay steady, and so now I feel like I'm just gonna. People are going to be like, who's that guy? And it's just going to be me with a lighter trigger. I don't know.
I think, honestly, because in my opinion, you shot very well. I think you'd be a little bit dangerous once you get a new trigger in that thing.
I think we throw about a 1-pound trigger in there, and you're going to it'll be a world of difference.
I'm going to have to dry fire that for a while, because otherwise I'm going to be, accidentally shooting some rounds off left and right.
We got marks at about a pound where it's sitting. Yeah. So if we set yours about the same,
you guys should just switch guns. He's used to hunting.
I know, right?
Right. And that 8 pounds wouldn't phase him.
I could have probably done better with your gun.
Yeah. But, no, some lessons learned there for sure around the gear, in particular on the rifle. The one thing I will say that didn't limit us was the Venom on top. I was very impressed. The Venom 5-25, we came out with that. I mean, that's a $500, $600 scope or something like that?
I think 5 Street.
First focal plane, 34mm tube. I mean, we were shooting in mils, had the EBR-7C reticle in there. I mean, dude, that was not a limiting factor at all. I didn't even think about it at half the time. I mean, even this morning, we had tons of fog, shade, all this stuff. I mean, I could see the target clear as day.
I mean, we dialing those things up and down, still getting, dead on impacts at the end of the day,
I mean, you would have thrown me behind the Razor here on Dave's gun. I'd been like, oh, okay, cool. But behind the Venom, yeah, not the limiting factor whatsoever.
The only thing that you guys may have missed out by using the Venom over, let's say, the Razor, is the change in your resolution going up to a Razor, watching your trace of your own bullet in the air.
Sure, yep.
That would stand out more of the Razor. Other than that, locating the target, seeing the targets, having a big enough field of view, all that stuff, it's fine with a Venom.
And the Razor adds weight.
True.
That used to be a bad thing.
Right.
I know, right?
Everybody wanted lighter carbon fiber, and then now it's all heavy steel.
Yeah. Can you guys add weight to that Razor? Yeah. The only other thing I noticed, too, was, real early this morning, lots of fog and shade. At one point, I was trying to find a target, and I zoomed it into, 25 power, It's like 25 power in those conditions in
Not
a $500 scope. Yeah. It was sort of like, okay, now I'm starting to see where a razor would be really shining, something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, I didn't shoot the stage on 25 power. I shot the stage on 12, and right back to perfect. So
the nice thing about that Venom, it worked incredibly well, and there's a lot of things, in this genre of shooting that aren't the cheapest. I mean, there's a lot of, there's definitely some expense that goes with, building a rifle out like this or a lot of the other ones. Now, there are other, there's production classes as well and things like that. But, it's a way for a person. I think it's definitely less of an obstacle for a person to get into it financially with something like the Venom.
Yeah.
But I might go to the Razor.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, you have that Gucci gun.
Mark likes nice
things. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't match.
Mark likes nice things.
Yeah.
You've grown accustomed to a certain
standard
lifestyle.
of living. Certain standard of living. Yes, Jim.
What else you got written on your piece of paper here, Mark? We gotta. At some point, we're gonna have the cops called for kidnapping Dave.
Oh, geez. Boy, I got a lot of things. I think an essential piece of gear is a Kestrel.
Yeah.
And also like knowing how to use it.
Yeah, and having Snake downloaded.
Some type of data device or paper. A lot of guys like the paper backups, but a weather meter or a wind meter is very useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually finally on this match figured out how to use one too. I mean, everybody, like, you can always go up to somebody, they can tell you how to use it, when you're there, because everybody's got one. But it is very, very nice to have. I mean, figure out. I was actually even going through and I'd update the weather, as the day progressed, because it would get hotter.
Yeah.
And then you'd actually I could see a noticeable difference. Not huge, but sometimes it was like a 2/10 difference if it got hotter during the day.
Yesterday we had that storm roll in. We had a pressure change.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Good call on that, Mark. Very essential piece of kit.
And then pre-planning your stages, and then just, I mean, at some point you just got to jump in like we did. It's double-edged jumping into a match like this one, because we got to see some really, really good shooters like Dave and Nick out there, and a lot of other great folks. So you can learn a lot of that nuance, and I guess you kind of know in a lot of ways, like, those guys are doing it right. Like, on the flip side, like, because of the limited time, it was taking me longer to get stable, longer to get in position, so I was timing out really early without actually executing that too many shots. I would be curious actually to know, like, my hit-to-miss ratio of the very limited shots that I actually fired. Maybe I shot okay. I don't know. So, like, in that aspect, I lost out on the experience of actually shooting from those various positions and kind of getting those reps in. So, a little double-edged there. I do know, even after shooting all those different stages, like, I saw some things that I'd never seen before. I shot off things that I'd never shot off before. And every time I left one, I'd be like, I'd have done that a little bit different or that a little bit different.
Right.
And there was one stage out there that is still like, I don't know, maybe everybody has that, but it is eating at me because I should have done really, really well on it, and I did super horrible on it.
It was the one with the animal silhouette seal targets.
But it wasn't even just the silhouettes. It wasn't that I like to hunt and they were animal shaped. It was the fact that I'm like, I made some mental errors on it, and that just like, then the wheels fell off. Like, but it was one of those, like, a lot of the other stages, I'd be like, yeah, par for the course. That's where I'm at. That one, I'm like, if you gave that to me again right now, I would do this way better.
One of the pieces of steel was a big buck. But it wasn't the first one.
Buck fever.
It wasn't the first one that you got to shoot at, and so you were there just like, I want to get to that buck. And you started seeing red, eyes rolled to the back of your head. I've seen it happen a million times. What were you gonna say, Dave?
If they were painted brown, you probably would have hit them all.
Right.
White probably confused you. I can see that.
God, that was just like, that's the one. Like, that's the one. I'm like, if I could have that one back. Like, if I could have that one back, I'm like, I was used to the format. Like, you're prone off a bipod. The shots were far. But really, like, my biggest issue, like, I mean, of course, then you're getting into reading wind, right, which is super tricky. But, like, my biggest issue was, like, getting stable, and that was just, like, as stable as a position as you could get.
Yeah.
So I'm bummed out about that one.
It's all right, Mark.
It's okay.
What do you guys think as far as, did we ask this yet? I don't think we did. What do you guys think as far as if you told somebody, like, a match to go to? Maybe not, like, a specific match, but, like, what the style of it would be like for your first match ever. Would you say?
Yeah, what would be your number one?
Like, throw yourself on into the fire, come to a big match like this that's 2 days long and it's got all these crazy, short time, all this stuff? Or would you say, like, take it easy, go to a local one day or in between?
I want to hear Dave's opinion on this one first.
Well, I think I know what you... I would say go to a local one. I mean, they're basically the same thing. You're shooting off the same stuff. They'll give you a little bit longer time. There's less people there. You won't have maybe all the top pros coming out for 1 day of shooting. So you'll shoot 10 stages. You'll get longer time limits. You'll still be doing essentially the same thing, and you might get some coaching afterwards from somebody. So
yeah,
I would say start off there and
right on.
A lot of the pro shooters
not do what you guys did.
I would
Yeah,
after
exactly.
doing
Don't
this,
do
which
it.
was an amazing experience, but I would share that thought.
A lot of pro shooters go to local and regional matches as almost practices and train-ups. So you might go to a local match here in Pennsylvania and bump into Dave Preston. And it's your first time shooting this type of match, and he's going to coach you on everything you did after the stage and after the match. You got guys like that out there that are going to do that for you. And that's just because they enjoy the sport. So a local match, definitely the best place to dip your toes in the water. That's where you're going to learn a lot of the trigger pulling and getting some of the basics down. I like the idea of hitting a hard match like this. Probably not for your first one, though, because it's going to be kind of a kick in the pants. But you do learn a lot about technique and what makes a good shooter a really great shooter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good points. I can't tell what I would... Well, I mean, it's already happened for me.
It's over.
It's done. That ship has sailed. First match. But
This is our path.
but from here, I feel like if I were to do another one, I'd probably do a local one. I wouldn't be afraid to come back. That is one thing that I'll say, though. Like, if you're sort of like, guys, I get it, local match, it's great to go for your first one. I just want to hit it big, though. Like, bucket list type thing.
Right.
I would also say, like, don't be afraid to go to a big match.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we showed up, had no business being here. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. Because anyone's welcome to this sort of thing. But, I mean, we were not, like, going to be doing super well.
No.
But everybody here was super stoked. Like, if we did hit targets, if we'd have a stage where we did pretty well. I mean, I had a stage where I, like, hit 4 targets. It just happened to be that, like, I think they were the only targets I got to shoot at, and I hit 4 of them in a row, and turn around, everybody's like, hey, yeah, like, cheering, and so it's like, oh, that's cool. Nobody's here like, well, I'm going to win, get these peasants out of my way, like, booting you off the stage when you're done. I mean, everybody gets stoked for you, and when you're at a big match like this, again, like you said, Nick, you go to a local one, may bump into one pro-level shooter who's there, go to one of these, you're surrounded by them. I mean, they're everywhere. It was like all I had to do was turn to the guy next to me. It didn't matter who he was. And be like, how would you approach this? He'd be like, well, let me tell you about wind, and let me tell you about, whatever. And he'd be like learning all this stuff. So, I mean, that was pretty cool. And all of them at any given time will, at like the drop of a hat, unless they're about to go next. And even sometimes when they're about to go next, will tell you whatever you ask them.
Yep,
So-
there wasn't a person here that wouldn't help you out. And then definitely there was a few people that were like, okay. And I guess they were in our squad too, but like just like mentoring all the way through. Like if you guys are busy,
your
like
squad kind of becomes your team. Like they're all rooting for you. They want you to succeed. Even if you're like in contention, like fighting over the same position in the ranks, like you're helping each other.
Yeah. I went up to Clay, guy in our squad, today, and I'm like, hey, can I look through these binos real quick? I'm trying to find the target. He's like, yeah, totally. And I'm looking through it. He goes, actually, can I look through those real quick? I'm like, yeah, sure. He goes, cool, I'm up next. I just want to see what the wind's doing. I'm like, dude, like, you should have just told me to wait like a second.
Yeah.
But, yeah, really, really good people. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I would say, Jim, my final thought,
All right.
and this is, personal, how I like to talk about me, but I achieved my goals with this match, even though I'm not happy with the way that I shot. I achieved my goals.
Okay.
Number 1, don't DQ. Oh, wait. Well, I guess if you killed somebody, that you DQ as well. So don't DQ.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to not finish last, which I actually thought I was
didn't.
a lock. And I did. There was even a couple rungs, so.
Yeah.
And you were even higher
Are
than
you,
that.
are you sure they showed up this weekend?
What now?
Those people show up.
They might have signed up.
Damn
and
it, Dave.
I was about to say too.
Burst my balloon.
I was about to say too. The other thing is, let's hope those people don't listen to our podcast because then they're like, "Boy, this Mark guy couldn't stop talking about how bad he did," and I finished behind him.
But they can,
Don't look.
They can take solace if they showed up.
Yeah.
Into how good it made me feel.
There you go.
Damn it, they didn't show up. I was last.
Well, way to go, Dave.
Sorry.
All right, my final thought, and then we'll move on to the guys who are really good at this sport for their final thoughts. But,
Yes.
My final thought, one, we got a new van. It does pretty well.
Oh, yeah?
We took it on a road
Did
trip
real
all
well.
the way out here. AC might not work, but that's just a minor issue. You guys should check out the YouTube video. We might even post about it. That's the latest podcast Podventure crew vehicle. It's a lot bigger and more spacious than the Subaru. Second, I'm just going to give a shout out to one of the ROs who's apparently a big podcast fan. Mark, I think in total we could go back and probably count on one hand still the amount of people that have come up to us and said they listen to the podcast. So we have at least like 5 listeners.
Right.
That's cool. Kevin on stage 7 and 8 here at the Vortex Vengeance match. Hey, thanks for volunteering and also for listening to the podcast.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, he said he kind of got into long-range shooting after listening to the podcast, after listening to guys like Nick and Dave and other people that we had on the podcast talk about long-range shooting and PRS and things like that. So it's really cool. If we can help just one person,
It's not all for
Jim.
nothing. All right, now the good guys.
Dave, you go.
Final thoughts on you guys? I think you guys did awesome. I mean,
Thank you.
we went up.
Thank you.
We gave you a quick and dirty rundown of like 4 hours on the range, how to, we crammed it all in. You soaked it up. You showed up to a match, and like you said, you didn't DQ. You were safe. You hit some targets.
Yes.
You timed out a lot.
Yeah.
But you learned a lot. You're going to get better. You said, you looked at the stages. You'd do them different next time. So you're going to see a lot of the same things again.
Mm-hmm.
So on your next one, you'll have a better approach. You'll know what you need, what you don't need, and I bet you'll double your score next match.
Cool.
Right on. Nick?
I was actually really proud of both of you guys. I know that just watching from day 1 to day 2, the amount you learned and the amount of improvement was dramatic and very fast. So that was fantastic. And obviously neither of you had, I don't want to say the right rifle for the job, but there was parts of your equipment that could have been better, and you still managed to go out there, do everything right. Even, yes, there was things you need to work on speed and stuff, which comes with time. But you're going out there doing everything right, taking your time, making good shots, being safe. I told you both like a goal that you should both have for yourselves is to not have a safety violation.
Yep.
Think about everything you're doing. Make sure you're being safe first and foremost, and then take your time on your shots, which you did.
Yep. Nick, I do want, if you could reiterate what you told me about essentially making good shots and like as far as like taking your time to make a good shot and trying not to go fast, because I think he says not making a good shot, like that's a waste of a shot.
Right. Yeah. So
and what's the why behind that?
So I told you that I would rather see you take 3 good shots than 10 bad shots. And it's not because I think that you're going to increase the number of total points you're going to get for the stage, but if you're just racking off rounds and you're not seeing where your shots are going, if you miss and you don't see where you went, it's a complete waste, because where's your next shot going? If you're going to make a change, you don't know what that change should be. And then what a lot of guys end up doing is holding in the same place and just burning another round in the same hole in the ground.
Or if you shoot fast and rush, you're building bad habits, and you're not going to learn to do it the right way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
If you do it the right way, you'll get fast at it.
Right.
Then you can be fast and do it right.
A lot of people make fun of the not fast as smooth, smooth as fast.
Fast as smooth.
Yeah.
Slow, smooth,
Slow,
fast.
smooth,
Yeah.
smooth,
Something
fast.
like that.
Yeah,
Smooth
slow,
yes.
smooth as fast.
What
But
you
that
said
is true.
still correct.
But there is truth behind that, because if you go through that process slowly and actually do everything correctly, everything will be more fluid.
Yeah.
And when you're fluid in the process, then everything comes more naturally. You get in that position faster. You get to have more time on the trigger where you get to make a better shot.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get more impacts quickly if you slow everything down and get it right.
For sure. I'll throw out one more thing, and I'm really sorry about this, but check your muzzle brake. Mine came loose.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I'm bad, but I'm not this bad. And then we went, and one of the other kind competitors in our squad said, "Hey, I think your muzzle brake is loose." And sure enough, we went up there. It was like spinning freely just by hand, and tightened that back down. He grabbed a wrench out of who knows where, tightened it down, and we got re-zeroed. I had a 300-yard zero, which came in handy. It was
actually worked out well for you.
Sweet. We had like 3 stages today that were like between 300 and 600 yards, and with a 300-yard zero, I could hold them. And I only had to hold like a maximum of like 2 mils. It was awesome.
Yeah, it worked out well for you.
It did.
And it was always like 0.5, 1 mil, and then like 1.5 mils. This is like, it was easy numbers to memorize, so you just held everything.
Oh yeah, I didn't even have to dial for like the last 3 stages. It was awesome. So there you have it. Another little tip for you. I was about to say pro tip, but I'm not a pro. Amateur tip for you. Sweet. All right. Well, thus metaphorically speaking, the sun sets on another pod venture. Mark, well done, sir.
You as
Nick
well.
and Dave, well done, sirs.
Yep.
More
good
well
job to
done.
both of you.
Yeah, and if you don't show up to a match that you signed up for, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Somebody like Mark might beat you. So, there you go. Yeah. Shall we?
Shall we? We shall.
We shall.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Good times.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.